Hi, this is Alexandra Kitty, hostess of the KlueIQ Chronicles, Crime, Code, and Clues. Today I'm going to talk about one upcoming game called, it's a series, unscripted, interactive documentary, but it's a little different. True crime it is. It's called Crimes of the Art. And episode 0 is called Vanished Virtues. So this has been something I wanted to do for a long time. Crimes of the Art. I first imagined this as a magazine article. I did give a lecture. I did quite a few blog articles and stuff like that over the years. I had even imagined it as a book and then a TV series. So finally I thought, okay, what about a gaming series? It's good because it's a non-violent kind of crime. So we're talking art forgeries, we're talking about art theft, art vandalism. So it's not violent. And most mysteries are very violent. They always include homicides and that if we're talking about the fictional realm, which is interesting because the genre wasn't made popular on a grand scale until Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did Sherlock Holmes. And if you actually read the canon stories, the short stories and the 4 novels, you know that murder was very rare. These were little puzzles. Sometimes it was in the nick of time that somebody wasn't killed, but the majority of Sherlock Holmes stories were not violent. And yet we have now a whole, cottage industry and it's always murder. It's very rarely, let's say, about money crimes and stuff. And even in the true crime genre, there aren't that many shows that looked at the non-violent aspects. One show that did it fairly well was American Greed. It did money crimes, which is a very difficult thing to explain to people. But it's I was very fascinated by financial crimes. I still am. But I'm also fascinated by art crimes. So I wanted to do this for a number of reasons, especially because Canada is such a hotbed for it, and we don't think of it. Because it's so close to New York City and Los Angeles, it's a good place to be able to do a lot of art crimes. This is something that interests me. And the laws for art crime in Canada are extremely low. So it was a very long time ago. I did a lecture at the Art Gallery of Burlington on this topic. And it was funny because that place skews old. It's not, Dundas Valley School of Art tended to cater more to children. And the Art Gallery of Burlington tended to skew to people who were probably 70 years old and up. So you had 2 very different art schools. And there it was interesting because a lot of the people didn't like what I was saying. I got a lot of negative feedback from that lecture because that's not what people wanted to hear. I had one woman come to me after the lecture, said, yes, but you shouldn't give your artwork to galleries. You keep it at your house. And I said, organized gangs that know who has art and they steal from people's houses. And she ran away. So it was an interesting feedback. Well, that can't happen here in Canada. And yet it happens here a lot. We just don't really talk about it. So for the inaugural episode, I decided to do something that was very hidden in the news, but it's about the amount of art that has been stolen in Canada and that people who are in charge of looking after these pieces don't even realize, sometimes for years, that they're missing. This happened multiple times at the University of Toronto. And I remember it was like within an anniversary of a decade that it happened again and again. So we have a lot of theft of art pieces and in different universities, different galleries, and people don't even know it's missing. So you could just, we talked, there was the big to-do about the Louvre and how easy it was for these people to steal artifacts. And the Louvre actually has security. But other countries that don't seem to think that's a big deal have none. So you could literally walk into a gallery, take a statue or a painting and walk out and nobody will notice. A lot of universities have artworks, their libraries have artworks, and nobody knows it's gone. So this was something I wanted to do a lot. I actually wanted to write a book about it, but there wasn't a lot of interest in publishers. It was sort of when I was doing journalism art and seeing there was problems with journalism and would have publishers go, there's no problems. That's just 1 or 2 off. And I mean, I had like a ton of examples until the disinformation company said, yeah, this is actually really interesting. Can you write a book about it? And then I ended up writing a lot of books about the problems with journalism. And now these days that's a true, people just take that for granted. When I was doing my books and my articles, it was an uphill battle. I always said it's writing while female. If a female says, oh, she's being hysterical, never mind she's done empirical research on the matter. So art crimes in Canada is through the roof. It's just not a violent crime, and it's not something that people really think of. And yet art pieces are used as currency. So a lot of wealthy people will actually buy stolen art on purpose. That is a way, if they want to pay for something that is dubious and they don't want to leave a paper trail, they use art pieces. It's a form of currency. We don't really think about this. So this is why I wanted to do Crimes of the Art as a series, because we're not very well educated into why our crimes are so significant. Sometimes you have fake artifact presented as real, but in Canada, there was one case many years ago where real artifacts that were stolen were made to look as replicas, and they were found out. And I actually interviewed the professor who uncovered this for an article. So this is something I've studied for years, and I have like an encyclopedic knowledge of Canadian art crimes. Just, I don't usually have a venue to discuss it. So when I started KlueIQ, I thought this is interesting, because this is something you could have children play. There's nothing gory. There's no violence. And yet we have statues that are stolen because they're made of copper, so they're melted down for the metal. We have a lot of people who think nothing of stealing paintings or drawings or whatever, or forging. We don't really actually have forgery laws in this country. So we have a lot of things going on, the secret hotbed of art crimes. And yet we don't actually have, let's say, reporters having an art crime beat. We don't have us looking at what happens, because it's not something people think is important or think that is happening at all. This is not, this is such an interesting subset of true crime. So I said, I'm going to do this as a game. And the first episode will be based in Canada. And it's not just a single episode where it's a single incident. It's a collection of art crimes that have built up, and those who are in charge of overseeing it admit that, yeah, there's been a whole bunch of problems. I'm going to bandy out a number of 140 instances, and nobody noticed. And this is one subset of art. So I don't want to give too much away, except this is a little different in terms of, well, we're not trying to find a killer. We're trying to understand this little known facet of crime and to understand why it's important to know. Because most people don't. They don't think, when they think of true crime, they don't think of, let's say, embezzling. They don't think of identity theft. So there's a lot of interesting crimes going on. But because there's no bloodshed, it's not interesting enough. It's more interesting. The other ones are sadder, but this is more intellectually fascinating because you can also take advantage of it and learn to spot scams. And this has always been my interest. How do people fall for hoaxes, lies, propaganda? And it's so obvious. And the people believe stuff thinking it's in their benefit when it's not in their benefit. It's actually detrimental to them, but they keep hoping against hope that, I don't know, somehow the reality fairy is going to come in and fix everything up and they don't have to think. So with Crimes of the Art, Vanished Virtues is going to look at this tiny facet. And this was like a tiny little throwaway piece in one Canadian publication, and I'll reference it in the game, that I found interesting. So when I did my further research, I knew a lot of these cases. It wasn't anything new for me. But for a lot of people, they have no idea this is going on. And yet it's important to know, because so much of criminal activity hinges on the free flow of stolen art, or making a forgery of a stolen piece, and then you sell it to a bunch of underground collectors who think they have the real deal and they don't. And it's a mess. Art crimes is a very messy, fascinating genre of crime. So in this game, you'll learn one facet of it. And as the series progresses, each will be about a specific art crime, and sometimes it's about a collective. But it's always about understanding how the mechanics of this part of art crime work. So that's all I have to say for myself today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like what you hear, comment, like, share, and subscribe. And until next week, ta-ta for now.